Well, friends, I feel bad that I was going to say something about the average age in the audience increasing when the youth and the children left. You know, I was looking around and I saw so many friends. I remember when Van Gilmer and I had hair. And I remember when Eric Dozier's beard wasn't there, and it certainly wasn't gray. I remember when Chuck George had hair and still made the best fruitcake in Illinois. It is so wonderful to be back. We all feel the same way about this special place because these are days that are precious in our hearts. And we come here and we feel like a tea bag that has been soaked in love. Don't you feel that way? And I remember when I first came to Greenlake and my kids were little, and my primary concern was, what are they doing? And can I get them before they break something? And now my kids have kids, and life goes on. So I want to make just a couple of introductory remarks about this weekend. First of all, I want to say to Shadi how beautiful her music is. And I want to reflect on the arc of our development musically, because we've really gone from nothing to something. Listen, I'm not denigrating the past. I'm just a witness. When I was in Baha'i school as a Baha'i child, the entire musical repertoire of kids was "Good morning, sun, good morning, sun. The night is done, the day's begun." Or, consultation means finding out what everybody is talking about. And if you really wanted to go out on a musical limb, we sang "Johnny is a Christian, Jacob is a Jew, Ali is Mohammed, and here's what they can do." They can learn to live together. This is way before the core curriculum or Ruhi Book 3 or any kind of musical coherence in our community, but we loved it. Now, those were the days when you went to Baha'i school and you sat next to your parents and you listened to whoever the speaker was for that Sunday morning. And if you acted out, you went to heaven early. The rules were clear, we all understood them, we all complied. But friends, I wanted to say just a couple of things in introducing the idea of hope in the family. And I wanted to just share that in my own family, there has been significant change just in the last few months. In the period from March through mid-April, we lost 4 of our family members. And it was overwhelming. Because, these people are the most wonderful human beings we know. And they've loved us, and we've loved them, and they saw special things in us. And we hoped to become what they saw. And we took for granted, because of their longevity and because of their spiritual prosperity and their God-given health, that they would just be with us always. And then to suddenly find that one after another in rapid succession is being called home is a moment of profound reflection for us, because it causes us to remember all the things that are most important about life. So as we think about hope in the family, and as we think about this in the context of these particularly troubling times, I'd like to make a couple of comments about my own family and its relationship to hope and faith. I remember as a child, and I was probably somewhere between 3 and 4. Probably wasn't 3, but wasn't 4 yet either. And I knew two prayers. I knew, "O God, guide me, protect me, illumine the lamp of my heart, and make me a brilliant star." And I knew, "Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. And if I die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take." And I remember as if it was yesterday, lying in my bed every night, and I would thank God for being God. I was 3.5. These were not sophisticated concepts. But I would thank God for being God, and I would thank him for Baha'u'llah. And I would thank him for the Bab, and I would thank him for Abdu'l-Baha, and I would thank him for Shoghi Effendi. And then I would thank him for my grandmother and my grandfather. Because in my eyes and in my heart, my grandparents were the finest human beings I knew. And I thought then, and I think now, that if I could live and be like them, then my life would not have been in vain. It would have been a good life. And it would have been a life that was faithful and obedient to the purpose of creation. I remember my grandmother telling me the story of how she found the Baha'i faith. Now, this was in the 1930s. And in the 1930s, my family was Baptist. My mother was a little girl. She had 6 surviving siblings. And my grandmother found the faith, and at the time, she was the founding and organizing member of the Baptist church in her community. And for black people in the 30s, the church was everything. It was your social circle, it was your political organization, it was your economic foundation, it was your friendship network, it was everything. It was your health care. I'll tell you that during that time, my mother was playing jacks by an incinerator, and a spark caught her dress. And she was burned severely from her knees to her chin, so much so that there was no skin. And at that time, the hospitals did not accept black patients. So here is a child of 6 years old who is on the doorstep of death, and there was no place to go. And it was the church that went and pleaded with the president of the hospital to let this black girl in the hospital to be treated. And for the next 6 years, they pieced her skin back together so that she could be alive and have a good life. But that's how central the church was. Now, my grandmother was taught the Baha'i faith by a 17-year-old white Baha'i youth named Johnny Eikenhower. Now, just picture this, because my grandmother was a formidable woman. Everybody knew Sadie Ellis, and everybody respected her, and she was as strong as her name implies. And every Saturday, skinny little Johnny Eikenhower would come to the back door of my grandmother's house, and he would knock on the door and he would say, "Mrs. Ellis, can I tell you about the Baha'i faith today?" And she would say, "Hi, Johnny, good to see you." "No. But you can come in and have some pie, and I'll give you some lemonade." And so every Sunday, or every Saturday, Johnny would come back, and he would knock on the door, and the scene would repeat itself. And then as circumstance would have it, my grandmother was in a reflective mood one day, and she remembered an encouragement that her father had given her before he died. He said to her that he believed that it was time for Christ to return. And he believed that when he returned, he would return as a thief in the night, just as he had promised. And he believed that people would be too caught up in their lives and their affairs and their confidence in faith to investigate the claim of the new messenger, the world redeemer, the Father that God had promised over time. And he asked her to promise him before he passed away that if she should hear of a new religion, she would investigate the new religion, and she would use the criterion that Christ gave us. Ye shall know them by their fruits, to determine the truth of the new claim. And so one day, Johnny Eichenhauer came to the back door on a Saturday, and he said, "Mrs. Ellis, can I tell you about the Baha'i faith today?" And she said, "Sit down, have some pie and some lemonade, and tell me about your faith." And that was the beginning of her spiritual journey. Now, it happens that I have had the privilege of seeing the letter of her enrollment dated way back in 1937. And it was a letter from the local Spiritual Assembly of Los Angeles, and it said, it was to Horace Holly, then Secretary of the National Spiritual Assembly, and it said, "Dear Mr. Holly, this letter is to introduce Sadie Rebecca Ellis to the National Spiritual Assembly." And it said that she had read the Gleanings, and she had read this book, and she had read that book, and she had demonstrated her knowledge, and it requested that she be admitted to the Baha'i faith. And Horace wrote back to the local assembly, and it said, because Sadie Rebecca Ellis has demonstrated her knowledge of the fundamental teachings and this and that and the other, she is accepted as a member of the Baha'i faith. And so when my grandmother became a Baha'i, one week, all of her kids went to Baptist Sunday school, and the next week, all of her kids went to Baha'i Sunday school. And of course, because of the close-knit nature of the congregation that she had come from, there was a great upset about her change of faith. People didn't understand it. They were afraid of it. And so the pastor came to her house, and he knocked on the door, and he said, "Sister Ellis, I've just come to retrieve you to the arms of Christ." And she greeted him with respect and with love. And as she showed him the door, she said to him, "If you knew Christ, you would know Baha'u'llah." And that was the beginning of our family's spiritual life as Baha'is. And so years passed, and by the time I came along, everybody I knew was Baha'i. All of my relatives, my cousins, when we went to Baha'i school on Sunday, it was a group. We're probably this wing of the auditorium. Cousins, sisters, aunts, uncles, my grandparents, my mother, and the rule was still the same. It was always the same. Sit next to your mother, don't move, and God forbid that you should speak out of turn or make noise. Consequences would surely follow. That was before we discovered the concept of child abuse. You remember those days. I can't be the only one who suffered the lash or who had to go break a twig off a tree. Longest walk of your young life, I've got to tell you. But then I would go to school and just consider the circumstances. You know, when I came up, we lived in South Central Los Angeles, which was then and is now the largest geographic ghetto in the continental United States. So there were black people for miles and miles, and nobody else. And then on Sundays, I would go to Baha'i school, and I knew everybody. I knew Asian people and Latinos, and I knew American Indians, and I knew Persians, and I knew whites and blacks, and it was a completely different reality. And everybody was talking about the very complex concepts of the Baha'i faith, the teachings of Baha'u'llah, and the demonstration of those teachings by Abdu'l-Baha, and the interpretation of those teachings by Shoghi Effendi. And they talked about Shoghi Effendi especially with such love and such reverence that the spirit of it caught my young heart. Now, I didn't understand who Shoghi Effendi was, and I didn't understand that he was the head of the Baha'i faith and the grandson of Abdu'l-Baha. But they talked about him with such affection that I believed he must be one of them, because there was such an intimate quality in the way they described him. And I thought to myself, well, who is this Shoghi Effendi that everybody talks about so dearly? And they kept describing him as the beloved gardener. Now, they were saying guardian, but that was not in my vocabulary. I was 4 years old, or 5 or 6, but it didn't matter. I was young, and they would say Shoghi Effendi, the beloved guardian, and I would think, oh, they're talking about a gardener. And I would think to myself, aren't these people wonderful? Look at the love they have for the gardener. And they talk about him like he's with them right here. But then they also talked about Shoghi Effendi in the Holy Land. And at that point, we had seen pictures of the Holy Land and the Shrine of the Bab and the gardens and so on. And I thought to myself, so Shoghi Effendi takes care of those gardens, and then he takes care of the gardens here. And everybody really loves him. He must be a wonderful gardener. And I thought to myself, you know, these Baha'is are so great. They're all different colors, and every one of them greets me with a smile and with encouragement and with genuine affection. And friends, you know, the truth of the matter is, we didn't have sophisticated Baha'i classes for kids. We certainly didn't have things that kids could go to. And I really didn't understand the things that were being discussed at the podium. But here's what I knew. I knew that when I went to Baha'i school, all those people cared for me, that I mattered to them, that they were all different colors and cultures, and yet the sense of love and affection and spiritual kinship was there. And so before I understood anything about the teachings, I understood something about the spirit of the faith, and the spirit of the faith was manifest in the love I felt among the friends. And that was just personified by their constant references to the things that the beloved gardener Shoghi Effendi had said. And so, as kids aren't wont to do, I tried to figure out just how it is that Shoghi Effendi could keep the gardens here and keep the gardens in Haifa, and I never saw him, and I'm here every week. And of course, I came to an answer which I was quite comfortable with for many years to come. I concluded that the pictures I had seen of the gardens in Haifa, the gardens were vast, and they were very complicated. So I naturally assumed that he spent most of his time in Haifa because there was more work to do. And of course, the gardens in front of the New Hampshire Avenue Baha'i Center in Los Angeles were tiny. You know, this is an urban area. You had a little patch of grass and some trees and some flowers, and they were all nicely kept. But I figured that, you know, even in my young mind, I figured 2 hours tops. And so the solution that I came to, the understanding that I came to was that Shoghi Effendi was in Haifa most of the week. He would fly to Los Angeles, probably on a Wednesday, because I wasn't there on Wednesdays. And he would take care of, tidy up the grass and the trees and the gardens and so forth, 2 hours tops. And then, devoted soul that he is, he would fly back to Haifa and renew his labors on the gardens there. And I was happy with that explanation for a very long time. I got to tell you what's true. But here's the point that I wanted to make about this. You know, we started this evening with that beautiful hidden word, O Son of Spirit, possess a pure, kindly, and radiant heart, that thine may be a sovereignty, ancient, imperishable, and everlasting. The thematic message of that hidden word is for us to fill our hearts with love and kindness as the first counsel of the messenger of God to us. But have we ever asked ourselves what he means by sovereignty? That thine may be a sovereignty, ancient, imperishable, everlasting. I wonder if there isn't a clue in the second hidden word, where he says, O Son of Spirit, the best beloved of all things in my sight is justice. Turn not away therefrom if thou desirest me, and neglect it not, that I may confide in thee. For by its aid thou shalt see with thine own eyes, and not through the eyes of others, and shalt know of thine own knowledge, and not of the knowledge of thy neighbors. And I wonder if the sovereignty that Baha'u'llah is referring to in the first hidden word is that we would be of independent mind, that we would know of our own knowledge and not of the knowledge of others, that we would see with our own eyes and not with the eyes of our neighbors, and that what we would see is God's love for us and the purpose of our creation. What does he say? Veiled in my immemorial being, and in the ancient eternity of mine essence, I knew my love for thee. Therefore I created thee, engraved upon thee mine image, and revealed to thee my beauty. And I'm wondering, friends, if the task that has been set before us by Baha'u'llah is to create ourselves and our families and our community and our nation and our world equipped with that kind of kindliness and radiance, that kind of sovereignty, that kind of confidence in the independence of mind, the application of spiritual principles to circumstances to unravel our complicated problems. Remember that Abdu'l-Baha told us that the happiness and greatness, the rank and station, the pleasure and peace of a human being would not depend on social status or material attainment, but on the scope of their learning, on the refinement of their character, and on their ability to solve difficult problems. Isn't this the simple means by which Baha'u'llah has given us to accomplish those very things? So I'd like to leave you with this idea. The Bible tells us that the kingdom of heaven is within. And Abdu'l-Baha tells us that the family is the nucleus of civilization itself. And so might it make sense that our fundamental task is to recreate the kingdom of heaven on earth, first in our own hearts, and then in our families, that it might radiate a transformational influence over the families in your neighborhood, and the people in your community, and the communities in your state, and the states in your nation, and the nations in your world. That's what we're here to talk about.